Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad to have you with us on the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have good, bad, crazy martinis for you today, as usual. If Jim sounds a little bit different, he's joining us from the lobby of the Hamilton Hotel downtown. He had an event in Washington, D.C. today. Thankfully, all the NATO folks are gone, so traffic is functioning to some extent today. But if he sounds a little bit different, that's the reason. And just like Hamilton, he's not throwing away his shot to react to the president's press conference today. So let's talk in general terms about last night, and then we'll get into some of the specifics in our second martini. Basically, I think for those who watched the press conference or didn't, this was kind of like the Stephanopoulos interview, maybe slightly better. The president did have some major stumbles, and early on, so if you were just dipping in for the first bit, you're slapping your forehead, and we'll get to that in the second martini. And, well, plenty of criticisms of what he had to say about different issues. But he didn't trail off. He didn't have the droopy mouth and looking like he was, one step away from the nursing home like he did in the debate a few times. And so he wasn't good, but he was not bad enough for the Democrats to really pile on today. We got 3 more backbenchers from the House saying that they think he should go, but that's not going to move the needle. So the Democrats are stuck in limbo again, and the Republicans are popping more popcorn.
Yeah, one of the headlines used the term purgatory as a description of where the Democrats are. Some would say they had that coming. But just kind of this recognition that, look, Biden did get up there and answer questions for about an hour, which is not something people necessarily thought he was going to be able to do after a interview with Stephanopoulos that was only 22 minutes. By the exceptionally low bar of the debate performance, yeah, it was better. Good by Biden standards does not necessarily mean good. It just means right. Good by he cleared the worst presidential debate performance ever. And I think if you're a Democrat, there were some reports of some Democrats who were hoping it would go badly. So it'd be very clear, okay, we've got to replace him. I think maybe this is the worst of all possible worlds, where Biden keeps turning in these, not great, but not disastrous performances, which make it a little bit tougher to say, okay, we have to unify behind, we have to replace him, we got to nominate Kamala Harris, but obviously not something that's going to dramatically change his standing. I don't think he's done anything that's going to unring the bell that rang in the debate there. So, I guess kudos to the president for doing it. I point out that he had his first press conference a little bit more than 2 weeks after the debate. That's a long time. Only one televised interview with Stephanopoulos since then. This is not a normal presidential schedule. NATO summit did indeed go pretty well. This is really, as far as presidential tasks go, not one of the harder ones. A couple errors we'll talk about in the next one. Democrats ended the day at the exact same place they were at the beginning of the day, which is in which they're really nervous about Biden. A big chunk of the party wants to replace him, but not necessarily a bunch. They got to change if he's not willing to go willingly, and there's certainly nothing indicating he's willing to go willingly. Then you're going to have to replace him with delegates. Those people are largely Biden loyalists. Those are not going to be easily persuaded or dislodged. But maybe if you tell them this day he's got no chance of winning, they'll change their mind. But that's where they are. So if you're Donald Trump, you went into the day smiling and you come out of the day smiling.
So on the delegate issue, are the people who can't actually come out in public and say you need to go, like the big dogs, like Pelosi and Obama and maybe a Clinton or two, are these really the people who are going to go behind the scenes and beat delegates over the head? Because that would seem to be, more awkward than just going to the White House and saying, it's probably time.
I'm not so sure, Greg, because I would point out the scenario I've been playing in my head the last couple of days is what happens if Obama and Pelosi and Schumer, they lead the delegation, they go to the White House and they say, Joe, we love you, but you got to hang it up. You look like a sure loser in November. What happens if Biden says no? And, any of those people could end up saying, Joe, we really think it looks bad. If Jill Biden and Hunter Biden say, Joe, you should stay in the race. It's very hard for any man to say to his wife and to his kids, oh, I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I'm going to do what these other people suggest. That's a really tough set of circumstances. So until you persuade Jill and Hunter, I don't think Biden's ever voluntarily leaving. So in a strange way, convincing the delegates might be easier. And it might be the sort of thing where you say to him, like, look, we know you love Joe, but he's going to embarrass himself, and his legacy is going to be the guy who let Trump get back into office instead of being the guy who beat Trump. And I think that might move. Look, you don't know what you're going to do. With a perfect irony that I mentioned at this Washington Post event earlier this morning is that the number of delegates it takes to change the nominee in Chicago in this Democratic National Convention is 1,968. 1968 was the year that there's terrible riots outside, this enormously divided. And Biden said the only way he would get down is if he would step down is if the Lord Almighty appeared and said, Joe, you got to do this. I'm not saying the Lord has appeared, Greg, but that just seems like a weird coincidence. It feels like we're seeing some sort of signal. It feels like God's trying to talk to us in one way or another. So yeah, I think the delegate plan is probably the more likely successful path ahead.
Oh, man. Between that and the pro-Palestinian protesters, Chicago's going to have...
the pro-Hamas crowd is like, well, what about us? Wait a second. Nobody's worried about us anymore? We're not even the angriest crowd there?
Oh, man, that could be the most fun convention since, well, probably Kansas City in 76 with Reagan and Ford. That was the last time there was any uncertainty.
Which was the
whatsoever.
one where they arrested Dan Rather and he was dragged off the floor kicking and screaming?
I don't know.
Whatever that one was pretty cool.
Democrats, so, I don't know. But, but here's the thing. Republicans are obviously high-fiving each other because the Democrats can't resolve this one way or another, and nothing news-wise has pushed this off the front stage, so it's just twisting in the wind. But this is, even if Biden remains the nominee, there are some state polls, there are some national polls, but the state polls matter more, of course. This isn't a slam dunk for Trump.
Correct.
Once the party realizes at some point, if it happens, that Biden's not leaving, they're going to rally the troops based out of hatred for Trump. There might be a few people in the margins who think, well, maybe I can't vote for Biden. We're going to vote for Trump. I'm not going to, but Biden's too far gone. Maybe I can't actually vote. But for the most part, if you hate Trump and you generally lean left, you're going to show up. And if somehow Biden manages to win, this could be the most embarrassing loss of all time.
Oh, God.
Trump,
this is the most embarrassing loss since John Ashcroft lost to a corpse in the 2000 Senate race. I mean, you could say, okay, technically Biden has a pulse. But yeah, no, like I think Biden has had a catastrophic past 2 weeks. I don't think it necessarily, as a result, Trump has had a good 2 weeks. I don't think Trump's been a little bit more disciplined and a little bit quieter. And he's said that. But he's not like he's having phenomenal media appearances. He's basically keeping a low profile, which is what he should do. But it's also kind of this recognition that, like, you see in these polls, it's not like he's bursting well ahead of 50% from a lot of them. He's still got a hard ceiling. There are a lot of Americans who don't. Now, some of us could say, what if we nominated Ron DeSantis? What if we nominated Nikki Haley or Tim Scott or any of these other guys? We'd probably have somebody who was well ahead of Biden even more than Trump is now. But Biden, Trump is he's playing the hand he's been dealt, not badly. So we'll see. But you're right. I think at some point the Democrats decide, okay, we got to nominate the corpse, or we got to whatever it takes. We'll get that guy over the hump, and the task before Trump will get tougher. Yeah,
and there's probably data that we're not seeing that's making Axelrod and John Favreau, the Biden guy, not the actor. Yeah. Freak out and say that Biden has no chance. So there's some sort of pulse that we're not seeing in the polls, probably.
There've been a couple of public polls that have, including the Washington Post poll, that looked not that bad for Biden, either showing it tied, and one, I think it was AP Ipsos, had him up by 1 or 2. Now these pollsters aren't regularly polling. It's been about a month, and they actually have Biden higher than he was last month. And I would just got to say, look, do you think Joe Biden is in better shape with the electorate now than he was a month ago? That's absurd, right? That's he's had the worst 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks you could possibly have. And 2, is any Democrat acting like Biden is doing fine? Very few. Most of the Michael Bennetts of the world are running around like their hair's on fire. So they're seeing something that says to them, this is catastrophic, and we got to change captains, or else the ship's going to crash.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see because, again, you have to think it's pretty unlikely that people are going to flip. But it's just think of it the other way. Is there anything Trump could do? If you're a Trump supporter, that would make you consider Biden? Probably not. Is there anything Trump could do that would make you not vote for Trump? Probably not, but there's maybe a slightly higher percentage chance of that than you actually making the flip. And so that's how most people on the left are probably looking at this.
I also wonder if are there some folks who are trying to decide between Trump or Biden or just staying home? And if they stay home, they're not voting down ticket. Does that have consequences for Senate races, House races, things like that?
Yeah. If they stay home, that will have a significant impact all the way down the ticket. So time will tell. We'll see if he's the candidate. We'll see what the impact is long term. All right, let's talk about Z-biotics. We've talked about the Democrat operatives pounding them down here the last few days, and, well, doesn't seem like it's going to stop anytime soon because Biden has not allayed the fears, but he hasn't sunk himself completely either. So if you're still going to be having those adult beverages over the weekend, Democratic consultants, take Z-biotics first. Trust me, you'll thank me in the next morning.
Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut, and it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your next rough morning. So Z-biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, as always, and you'll feel your best the next morning.
Yeah, I have a coworker here. I've mentioned it many times. He knew exactly how much he could drink responsibly, but as he got older, things were not so great the next morning, and so he tried Z-biotics when he had the opportunity, and this advertisement happened. He tried it. His wife tried it. They both said definitely makes a big difference. So go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. Z-biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, on to our second martini now, and this is going to be the more entertaining martini as we look at some of the moments that definitely had people slapping their foreheads last night. This was, first of all, not at the press conference. This was in the closing ceremony, basically, of the NATO summit, where Biden, as the host, has all the other NATO member heads of state on stage, and he's about to introduce Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and this is how it came out.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Wow. Yeah, that's dribbling off your foot in the last few seconds when you're down by a point. And the more you try to explain it, the worse it gets. Then, very early on in the press conference, the question was, are you confident that if Kamala Harris ended up being the candidate, that she could win and that she could do a good job?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she's not qualified to be president.
Vice President Trump. And Trump had fun with that one on Truth Social last night. Then there was the actual content, Jim. Different questions. And Biden was, as we said, more coherent than a lot of people expected, but he was still wrong on a lot of stuff and still pandering and demagoguing on a lot of different stuff. Here's my personal favorite, Jim. When it came to the economy and what he accused people of saying about his economic agenda, and they're right, actually.
As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward, can't do that, it's going to cause inflation, things are going to skyrocket, the debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job.
Yeah, I don't really care what the 16 Nobel laureates said. It did cause inflation. It did cause a radical increase in the debt as well. And then on other issues, including Israel, he got the question from the NPR reporter, and he spent almost his entire time criticizing Israel. The only thing he says, we need a ceasefire. Well, we'll help you get the bad guys too. But Israel, clearly the problem, as he explained that. And throughout the press conference. So Rachel Maddow and others thought he was this tour de force on foreign policy. Same old Biden, same old gaslighting, as far as I could tell.
Yeah, again, to emphasize, good by Joe Biden standards does not mean good. It just means not necessarily disastrous or as bad at a level we've gotten used to, that no longer jumps out at us as being particularly bad. I was meeting with a group of Ukrainian journalists who were in town for the NATO summit a bit before that, and the word of the Zelensky-Putin flub had gotten out. And one of my friends who was at the dinner had not heard it. And I said, he's like, so how's the summit? I'm like, did you hear what Putin said, what Biden said? But there I go. Right? So I'm like, by the way, let me tell you, I'm the last person in the world who can give anybody grief for using the wrong name, Rich. And for For those who don't get it, it's an in-joke that I've called Rich Lowry Greg several times in the other podcasts, the editors. If it happens once in a while, this is not a huge deal. But that circumstance, when everybody's so on edge about how's Biden going to look and how's Biden going to sound and how sharp is his mind, that's really bad. You could almost hear the gasp in the room when he said President Putin. I mentioned this to my friend, and this friend is conservative. He's not a Biden fan, but he's just kind of like, hold it together, man, hold it together. And his face just like, you've got to be kidding me. He couldn't get that, like my expectations were low, but I can't, in fact, to quote what I wrote in today's Morning Jolt, Barack Obama warned us, don't underestimate Joe's ability to F this up. Mr. President, I regret to admit I did underestimate Joe's ability. I did not think he would call Zelensky Putin at a big NATO summit in front of everybody. That's all pretty bad. And just other things, like, yes, his voice was a little stronger, he was a little sharper, but what he's saying actually matters. And he's talked about how his fundraising money raised, we're not doing bad. Well, no, that's not true. The fundraising has basically stopped since the debate. At one point he said there are at least 5 presidents who have run with lower numbers than I have now, which sounds, okay, it's not that bad. There have been 45 men who have had 46 presidents. Remember, Grover Cleveland, they count twice. But so you're in the bottom 9th? That's not great. That's
Did
really
any of them win?
Yeah. That's the other wrinkle on that. But I think the answer, he said, for the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling 50 time zones a week before. First of all, it wasn't 50 time zones, and he was back within 12 days. This was not like, I just came back from my long flight, and then I went to, you had plenty of time to prepare. And so, there was the usual stuff, but I think the single most revealing answer, and something that, if I were a Democrat, I would be spitting hot fire right now. The question was, if your team came back and showed you data that she, meaning Kamala Harris, would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race? And Biden responded, no, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. Then he went to this weird Biden whisper. He said, no one's saying that. No poll shows that. No, that's not, But if you're a Democrat and you believe what you've been saying, that Donald Trump is this existential threat to American democracy and that under no circumstances is going to get back into the Oval Office and he's going to round up people and he's going to throw them into jail, that he's the worst thing, then you can't, I'm picking these numbers out of a hat, but let's say the polling indicates Kamala Harris has a 40% chance of beating him and Biden has a 30% chance of beating him. You go with Harris. You don't go with the longer shot. This is just, basic elementary. If the stakes are this high, you want your best quarterback in the game, and you don't want, out of loyalty, to stick with the old veteran if he doesn't give you a better chance of winning. And he just totally rejected that. And I think if you're a Democrat or just a Trump opponent, you should be livid over this. And I can't believe he just said that, and nobody's reacting like this is a big deal. And he's basically saying, I'm putting my ego and my personal sense of how important I am ahead of beating Donald Trump in November.
Nah, that's crazy. Did you see the video of Biden's national security team when he referred to Harris as Vice President Trump? Blinken basically holds his breath and closes his eyes as he leans back. Secretary Austin just deadpan like this happens all the time. And then Jake Sullivan's, he's a little bit obstructed by Austin, but he just brings his hand up to his mouth and you could just tell he's just like, oh no. Oh, no, it was...
You just picture the pencil snapping in somebody's hand in the back of the room.
And somewhere in the room, Karine Jean-Pierre is like, oh, no, I got to talk about this tomorrow, too.
Get me another binder.
Unbelievable. I'll tell you what is believable, though, the fantastic benefits of Field of Greens. You want to eat healthy, you take supplements, but you still need all those great vitamins and minerals from the food that you need to eat, and the best way to get that is Field of Greens and their smoothies. They come in great flavors. I've had the strawberry lemonade. It's going to help your heart. It's going to help your lungs. It's going to help your kidneys. Function's going to be better, and your doctor's going to notice if you take this stuff consistently about how much better you're doing.
Field of Greens is nutrition the way nature intended. Made up of 100% USDA organic fruits and vegetables. It's got antioxidants, fiber, and prebiotics formulated by a team of physicians.
So don't look back and say, I should have paid attention to nutrition when I was younger. Field of Greens is a key to better health today and when it matters most. To start, Field of Greens will give you 15% off your first order plus free rush shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code 3ML. That's promo code 3ML to get 15% off and free shipping at fieldofgreens.com. Fieldofgreens.com. All right, Jim. Well, the Democrats have been center stage, much to their chagrin, for the past 2 weeks. They haven't been able to shake it really at all. They will have an opportunity next week because the Republicans take center stage at their convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You'll be there for much of it, and Trump will obviously...
Some of it.
Some of it. Trump will obviously be nominated. We'll find out who his vice presidential nominee is. Maybe we'll find out before he gets to Milwaukee, maybe not. It seems like none of the most commonly mentioned names seem to have a clue of who it is yet, so I guess he's keeping it close to the vest. And then there's going to be other supposed rising stars in the party, well-known people in the party who are going to be speaking. It was announced DeSantis is going to be on the roster this week. Haley is not going, but she's released her delegates. And in a week where the Republican platform really disappointed and frustrated conservatives on social issues, whether it's marriage and especially abortion, gun advocates were also not very happy with how little was mentioned there. One speaker in particular is also frustrating people, and I'll certainly forgive you if you don't know who this is. I don't know that I did either. Her name is Amber Rose, and the New York Post describes her thusly. A former stripper who has fiercely criticized Donald Trump in the past will be a speaker at the RNC in support of the 45th president's re-election. The Philadelphia-born Rose, 40, gained fame in 2008 after she appeared in the music video for rapper Young Jeezy's single Put On and began dating Kanye West. In 2013, Rose married another rapper, Wiz Khalifa, and had a son by him before filing for divorce the following year. Parents, you might want to hit pause here for just a moment when I talk about the rest of her biography. Quote, she is also the author of the book, quote, How to Be a Bad Bitch, unquote. She's modeled for Louis Vuitton and founded the Los Angeles chapter of the, I'm not making this up, Slut Walk Feminist Protest March. Jim, there are certain demographics I know that the Republican Party feels like it's not doing well with. I'm not sure this is the one that they need to spend a lot of time on. This is not going to make people feel any better about how the current incarnation of the Republican Party feels about social conservatives.
So first of all, Greg, Amber Rose, best known for taking her clothes off and doing photo shoots with like nearly nothing on. Never heard of her. Never, no familiarity with her whatsoever. This is less than ideal. Now, it's celebrities appearing at political conventions is a long and storied tradition. I can remember The Rock appearing with Dennis Hastert. Ironically, like Amber Rose is no longer the most embarrassing figure in this conversation, but we've mentioned that Hastert was worse. So The Rock did an appearance. I do remember being in Cleveland, and look, there are a lot of great Americans who can provide testimony to Donald Trump and the qualities he brings to the Oval Office. But I got to say, if anybody is going to convince me, Greg, it's Scott Baio. Because people say, well, what experience does he have? He's never been in government. But Charles was in charge, and that, to me, just speaks of authority, speaks of it. So we're kind of used to it. I also saw Dana White of The Ultimate Fighting, is also appearing. So by itself, it's not. But there's kind of this unnerving sense that the Republican Party is just desperate for anybody who's remotely famous and is willing to speak. That they'll come on up on stage and we'll give you 5 minutes, maybe in prime time, maybe earlier in the night. We'll see how it shakes out. But I don't understand whose idea this was. I realize political conventions have become more and more of a circus or an infomercial. You see fewer speeches about policy. You see fewer speeches by lawmakers, senators, governors, folks like that. But come on, could we have any stand? Is there any celebrity we'd say no, we don't? Or it was the good news. Is the good news, Greg, that yes, she's here, but we're not bringing her ex Kanye?
Yeah, as far as I know, Candace Owens does not have a speaking slot, so that's probably a plus. Charles was in charge not only of the days, but the nights, so he would be more available than President Biden, not just 10 to 4.
In fact, a Trump-Baio ticket would bring back America's happy days. Happy days are here again.
Now, one of the things, then I thought they would do this again in 2020, when, COVID forced audience-less convention, except for Trump's speech at the White House. But they went to one of the big halls in D.C., and they had people give speeches as opposed to being on Zoom like the Democrats did. And it was really effective, I thought. You had your politicians here and there. Tim Scott gave the keynote address, but one of the smart things they did is they had people come out and say, oh, here's this Trump policy that got enacted, and here's how it benefited me, from right to try. Or they had the Cuban guy who fled communism and said, I'm really afraid that if the Democrats win, America's going to start looking more like where I came from. Or the widow of the former police officer in St. Louis who was killed during the George Floyd riots and saying we've got to have law and order, and I trust President Trump more to do that. That would be far more effective. Nobody knows these people's names, but once they hear the stories, I think it resonates more than some B, C, or D-list celebrity. But apparently, at least in this case, they didn't hear that.
This is not necessarily something you can do as a former president, but the thing I remember most, I think, from the convention of 2020, such as it was the swearing in of the new citizens. And so anything you can kind of do to break up the standard speeches, and you can get very tired of politicians' speeches that sound like they're quoting Whitney Houston. I believe that children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they have inside. We've heard that speech a million times. So anything, I don't mind it. And by the way, if Amber Rose goes out and gives that speech, my mind will be blown away. It will demonstrate we're living in a simulation.
Exactly. And there are certainly issues. You could bring people in to talk about how Biden's bad policies have hurt you. I wouldn't be shocked if Laken Riley had a family member who talked about the border and all these lawless people coming across, or the inflation, how it's crippling my middle-class family, and on and on and on. So maybe there will be some of that, but you'd think they'd make a bigger deal out of it heading into the convention if they were going to do that. Lastly, prediction on VP, or do you think it's just too hard to tell?
No. So earlier in the week, apparently there's a report that Donald Trump Jr. will be speaking Wednesday night right before the vice presidential nominee speaks. And apparently Donald Trump Jr.'s favorite of the options is J.D. Vance. So that it could be somebody else, could be Burgum, but I don't know if you have Donald Trump Jr. speak before Rubio or somebody like that. And also just the twist in the race of the last couple of weeks. It's very easy to see Trump saying, oh, I'm doing really well. Well, now I can double down on myself, double down on MAGA. I can pick the guy who's most like me to reinforce what I am. Because obviously, it's not like people think Ohio's a pretty darn red state. I guess there's a theory that Vance would help in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, places like that. But so I think he's currently the front runner. I think Burgum is one of the, actually, ironically, the do no harm choice who might actually help the most. I don't think Rubio, I guess that's probably the clearest pitch you could make to the Nikki Haley voters. But I also kind of feel it would not shock me if Trump decides he wants somebody completely who hasn't been on the short list, and to pull a rabbit out of a hat and surprise. I don't know who that person's going to be, but someone who nobody was expecting, just to shock. The problem is that there's no person who's, like, if you're a really good option, you'd probably be on the list by now.
Yeah, I think of the names that are on there, I'd probably predict Doug Burgum. I think at one point he maybe wanted a woman, but Kristi Noem, that dog won't hunt. We know that. If
that dog ain't won't do much of anything anymore.
If there is going to be a dark horse, and if Trump can stand being on a stage with someone taller than him, Glenn Youngkin, but we'll see.
It makes a lot of sense. A lot of polling in Virginia looks very close, but Greg, I would not count on a dark horse candidate because Kristi Noem shot the dark horse.
On that note, Jim, have a great weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday.
Have a great weekend. See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.